Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. Ramadan Kareem to all of you who are observing. My name is Margaret DeRoos, and I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Middle East Understanding. For those who are new to us, the IMEU is an independent nonprofit organization. We assist journalists at media outlets large and small with their coverage of Palestine and Palestinians, and we create content, videos, graphics, podcasts, that raise awareness of the reality of life for Palestinians, the reality that the present showed so powerfully. We recognize that despite the huge impact that US policy has on Palestinian lives, Palestinians have had little opportunity to engage directly with American audiences, and empathy in the US and US policy have suffered as a result. So we change that by bringing Palestinian voices, stories, and perspectives into the public conversation. Thank you to all of our supporters here tonight. As a nonprofit, we couldn't do this work without you. If you're a journalist, we hope that you will see us and use us as a resource. We can help with fact checks, with background info and analysis. We've got tons of untold stories that would enrich your audience's understanding, and we can connect you with a wide range of Palestinian newsmakers and expert sources. So reach out anytime. If you're not a journalist, but you want to learn more about our work and stay up on all things Palestine, follow us on social media at the IMEU or reach out to one of our team members. All of us at the IMEU are just thrilled to see the present get the recognition that it has. We hear so often, and I'm sure many of you have, that the Palestinian issue is complicated, right? And here we have a film that tells a simple human story so powerfully and so clearly. It packs a PhD's worth of understanding into 24 short minutes. I'm just as excited as you to hear from the team behind this amazing film. Our moderator for today's conversation is the talented actor, producer, and proud Palestinian and Brooklynite, Tarek Bishara. Most recently, Tarek starred in director Deborah Kampmeyer's film Tape opposite Isabel Fuhrman. Tarek co-starred in the Golden Globe-nominated Sundance hit The Tale opposite Laura Dern. And across his career, alongside actors from Robin Williams to Richard Gere to Seth Rogen. His TV roles on top-rated Emmy Award-winning shows are many. He has guest starred and recurred in CBS's FBI, Bull, Madam Secretary, NBC's Law and Order SVU and Chicago Med, and Fox's House MD and the series Susanna. Tarek's passion and his current focus is to develop a slate of TV and film that seeks to center Arab and Arab American narratives and characters. It's my pleasure to introduce our good friend, Tarek Bishara.
Thank you, Margaret, and thank you to the IMEU for hosting this incredible event in support of an incredible film. Before I start talking about the film and introduce our panelists, I wanted to just do a little bit of house cleaning here in terms of Q&A. So we're going to introduce the panelists, and then I'm going to ask them a few questions, and then we're going to allow the audience to ask whatever questions they want. So there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you're not able to ask there, if you're watching live on YouTube, you can email your question at info@imeu.org with your question, and we will receive it there. So to start us out, as Margaret mentioned, the presence premise is simple on the surface. It's a father and a daughter and a family living in the West Bank, venturing out to buy a wedding anniversary gift for the man's wife. Simple until you add in the Israeli occupation. And what we end up with is an emotional portrayal of a family that is attempting to live a normal life under extraordinary circumstances. And I have to say that when I finished watching it for the first time, I walked away thinking something I already knew, which is that Palestinians are indeed a resilient, incredible people. You can break Palestinians' back, but you cannot break their spirit. And if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. Films like this, in my opinion, feel like an essential vehicle in battling the hypernormalization of Palestinian oppression and objectification. The significance of it being a BAFTA-winning, Oscar-nominated film available to millions of people on Netflix at the moment makes it one of the precious few Palestinian productions that has been given the opportunity to tell the truth of the Palestinian people to a worldwide audience. It portrays the daily life of occupation, and it asks the question, do you accept this as an audience? Film is a vehicle of change, in my opinion, and I could not be more proud to moderate this conversation with such an esteemed, talented, and passionate panel of Palestinian professionals. And that was some word gymnastics right there. I'm going to ask my panelists to come on as I introduce them, if that's possible. So we'll start out with the writer, the director, and the co-executive producer of this film. Farah Nablsi is a Palestinian born and raised in London. She began her career in the financial sector and in 2015, thankfully, made the leap to filmmaking. The Present, which she, as I said, co-directed and co-wrote with Hind Shufani, has won upwards of 25 audience and jury awards internationally and stateside, and recently won the BAFTA for Best Short Film and is currently nominated for the Oscar for Best Live Action Short. It was the only short nominated this year for both awards, and I hope it wins both of them. Fingers crossed for you. Saleh Bekri is an award-winning actor, Palestinian actor that started his career in the theater and has appeared in acclaimed films such as Wajib, Salt of the Sea, and Elise Slimani's The Time That Remains. He was born into one of the most famous Palestinian acting families, including his obvious acclaimed acting father, who's an actor, Mohammed Bekri. And I first met him 2 years ago at the Sundance Directing Labs, where he workshopped a Lebanese film and I, the Palestinian, ironically. I'm happy to call him a friend. Hi, Saleh. Osama Bawardi is a Palestinian producer who in 2010 co-founded Philistine Films with his wife, acclaimed Palestinian director Anne-Marie Jasser. He began his career working on productions such as Hani Abu Assad's Paradise Now, the first Palestinian film nominated for an Academy Award, as well as Jasser's Salt of the Sea. When I Saw You, which was Palestine's entry to the Oscars in 2013, and Wajib, which won an incredible 36 prizes at festivals around the world. Now that to me is, I mean, this is an award-winning, incredibly accomplished, talented panel if I ever met one. So I'll start off with you, Farah. My first question to you is, you know, there are infinite instances of Palestinian civilians being absurdly dehumanized and oppressed, both inside the occupied territories and in the broader diaspora. I was curious, what about this one moment in this character's life inspired you to take a deeper dive, to put a lens on this? And to simplify it, why this story?
So I was just saying earlier today on an interview that so much more actually takes place at these checkpoints, whether it's women giving birth at these checkpoints, potentially losing their own lives or their babies, whether it's people losing their lives because they can't make it to a hospital or to a doctor, or being shot, you know. So this is the PG version of what actually goes down at one of the hundreds of checkpoints. I mean, there's over 100 Israeli checkpoints all over the West Bank, and another 100 or so flying checkpoints that can appear anytime, anywhere. So this is one story at one of those checkpoints that is the PG version of what actually happens in reality. But I think that's exactly it. It didn't need to be one of the more intense or disturbing or upsetting scenarios. Mm-hmm. Just touching on something that is so basic, so simple, this act of going somewhere to purchase something and returning is possibly the most universal thing that anyone on earth has to do, you know? And yet it becoming such a frustration, such a humiliation, jumping through hoops and obstacles for such a simple task, to me, makes the story that much louder and larger and more profound and harder to come to terms with even. So it just made more sense to me. Keep it simple and let it be relatable.
And it really, really worked. You did a fantastic job of making it something that anyone can relate to. That's just, you know, the simple act of buying your wife an anniversary gift. So I'll ask you a question next. So, you know, being a Palestinian male that lives in the 48 area, I'm certain at some point you've experienced, the things that the character has at one point or another, or multiple times, or on a daily basis. So I know that you share that in common with the character. What I was curious about as being an actor is, where are you similar and where did you split with the character? Meaning, how is his life experience different than yours?
I am an artist. He is a worker. He works in building. He works physically. His work is physical. My work is very much spiritual, and my problems with the checkpoints is different than his problems. Let me explain. I am an actor. If I want to act in Haifa, my audience would be limited to the 48 Palestinians, to the Palestinians who live in the area of the 48. I cannot go with my play to act in the West Bank or in Gaza. So because of the checkpoints, because that I'm not allowed to work with Palestinians from the West Bank in Haifa, because of the checkpoints, I'm not allowed to go to Gaza. So our life as artists are separated, and we cannot do art in a normal way. I cannot do art in a normal way. Yusuf cannot live his daily life in a normal way. What I do a culture. What he do, he gets, he wants to provide a decent life to his family. I want also to provide a decent life to my family, but the circumstances of him and me are different. In this we are different, but all other aspects are very similar. We are very similar. He is very loving to his family, to his kid. He wants to be a good father to his kid. We see how much he loves his, and I'm trying to be a good father to my son. So I share with him, let's say, the things I share with Yusuf is much more than the things that I don't share. So it's just only technical things that is related to where I live is different with how it affects me. But
I asked you that
the
question.
feeling thing is the same. The feeling is the same. I'm on the checkpoint. I feel the same. I feel frustration. I never in my life could act normally in a checkpoint. I never in my life could consider the checkpoint as a normal thing. Never. I couldn't. So even when I lived in Ramallah in the West Bank, and I was teaching theater in the West Bank in the drama school, I lived there for 1 year. I couldn't leave Ramallah just because of the fact that I will face a checkpoint. Maybe a whole year, I went back few times that you can count them to the 48 area, just because I don't want to see a checkpoint. So in a way, I imprisoned myself because there is a checkpoint that I didn't want to pass.
Yeah, it's interesting. The reason I asked that question is because, I find that in film, they usually try to portray, if the filmmaker is not Palestinian or at least Middle Eastern or Arab, they try to, broad stroke that almost, everyone's going to have the same experience, even if they live in the same place. And really everyone's story is different, no matter what circumstance. They can be living all the same circumstances, but their experiences are different. Osama, I wanted to ask you, so as a producer who you've worked on, local productions, you've worked on international productions. Interestingly, for me, I read that Salt of the Sea, one of the films you produced that Anne-Marie directed, was financed entirely with local private financing. So my question to you is, how does Palestinian cinema flourish within an economy and a political climate that is crippling? And I would like for you to address that. And also, how did the funding come together for this particular project in terms of your involvement?
Thank you, Tom, Tariq, for the introduction. It was actually when I saw you, the film that was totally financed, Arab financed. I mean, as Palestinian producer, you always have to think out of the box. Like, there is no platform, there is no, there is no function, there is no, so you really have to be creative about finding the money for your films.
Right.
And, in my experience as producer, we tried to fund films differently. Each film was funded differently. Some films were funded, by mostly equity Arab money and some grants and some funds in the world, like World Cinema Funds. Other films, like Wajib, I financed through a co-production that was very painful and difficult. 8 countries co-production, like to manage with 8 countries and manage like 23 sources or 25 different sources of finance, all the legal, all the structure. It becomes complicated. But sometimes this is the only way to make our films. So, it's always different, and each film is different, and each filmmaker, brings in something to the table, of course, brings in, something else. So, for example, with this film with Farah, it was a co-production together, and we found the money together. Farah came to me with a project, already financed a big chunk of it, and I completed the finance through, some other sources, Doha Film Institute, and some in-kind support, and the own invest. So, each time is different, each film is different, but as a Palestinian producer, and sometimes even Arab producers, because many Arab countries are the same like Palestine. We don't have national funds, we don't have support, we don't have a government backing, we don't have a government even, So it's difficult, but in the same time, like, there is no limits. You can try anything. It's like in other countries in Europe, they know either you get the money from the national fund or not. That's it, end of story. Or you make your film or not. But we as Palestinians, in the same way that we cross the checkpoint, we make our films. And we think, shall we do a tunnel, or shall we jump off the wall, or shall we, So it's like that. It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
We hustle.
Yes.
That's for sure. That's in our genes. Farah, I was wondering, there was something that struck me that was almost timely about this movie, because I feel like it is timeless, obviously, considering the occupation, but there was something so timely where I felt like during the last year of the pandemic, the entire world experienced curfews. The entire world experienced, limited freedom of movement. And I thought about that. I thought so much about, like, and a lot of my friends who are, have never experienced something like this in the US, and I live in LA, they were very much like, I can't believe, what do they mean we can't go here? What do you mean we can't do that? In the back of my mind, the whole time I'm thinking of, like, yeah, there are so many other parts in the world that live like this on a daily basis, that live with their electricity being controlled, their water being controlled, their fishing waters being controlled. Like, everything about their lives is steadily controlled, specifically in Gaza and in the West Bank and Palestine. So, I mean, do you think that's part of the reason? I mean, the film is fantastic, but do you think that's part of the reason why the film is resonating so broadly with audiences at the moment?
I think that it's almost like this idea of every film has its time, and some films are ahead of their time and some are behind their time. So they could have still been great films, but they weren't at the right time. And so I agree. I think that the success of this film is a culmination of different things. And I certainly think one of them is this environment of this past year. Of course, I didn't make this film. We made it before the pandemic. We didn't know the pandemic was coming, but somehow there, that little bit of empathy, that extra kind of, recognition of having your movements controlled. Of course, the major difference is that this is for people's health ultimately around the world, whereas what's been going on in Palestine for decades has absolutely nothing to do with health, and it's just one part of a massive control system. But I think it has lent something. I also think the Black Lives Matter movement and how things kind of erupted. I also think after 4 years of a Trump presidency, there's a zeitgeist right now of really just a world crying out for an end to discrimination and racism and oppression. You feel it, and again, I think that has lent itself to the film as well. So yeah, you can have a good film and you can have some phenomenal acting and you can have, but if the timing isn't quite right, maybe it doesn't succeed as well. And I think that has lent itself. Yeah.
So I have a question for all of you. As all of you are making Palestinian films, or telling stories about people from the country we come from. Do you feel that this generation, I feel like there's a lot of filmmakers that Palestinian filmmakers that are emerging at the moment. It feels like there's a bit of a real movement in terms of people wanting to express themselves. Maybe it's because technology has become easier to utilize in terms of phones or whatever. And my question is, do you think that this is the generation that's going to take back control of its own narrative on film? Do you think that filmmaking for a Palestinian is a coping mechanism? Do you think it's an act of rebellion? Do you think it's a creative outlet, or all of them? And is it possible for a Palestinian produced film, acted and directed and written film, to not be those things? What are your thoughts? So for all three of you, I have many more questions, but we're going to have to move into the audience Q&A in a second. So whoever wants to answer that and tackle it, I'd love to hear from all three of you.
I'm going to say something short, and then I think the other guys will have something maybe more substantial to say.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, I think film is one of the few tools left for Palestinians actually to turn to in telling our narrative, and in an act of defiance, if you like. But I also think it's possibly one of the most powerful tools available, and that it has not been used as much or as widely as we could and should. So, with the emergence of more and more Palestinian filmmakers and using this incredible medium of human communication, probably the most powerful form of meaningful human communication the world has ever known, along with this technological revolution, of phone and tablets in everyone's hands, I think is great. So even though it's one of the fewest tools left, I think it's one of the most powerful ones. And if we can use it, we should. And so that's my 2 cents on that.
Osama?
I think, yeah, I mean, I think cinema was there, like there was a cinema arm in the PLO, and there was the cinema of resistance, and they were documenting, documenting the daily life, even, back in the 60s, and there were films made, and I think that, that this is a continuation. I don't know if it's the right word or not, but this is, and now with the technology, of course, as you said, it helps a lot, for it's more accessible, and it's more, there is more awareness also, because of the whole technological, that what's happening in the last 10 years. But I think like cinema for Palestinian people, it's, not like Egypt, but
yeah,
it was there, I think, and it's, and it's a great tool for the new generation, and we see, you know, there's a lot of new filmmakers, a lot of new films happening, a lot of all over the Arab world, but especially in Palestine, definitely.
Saleh?
It amazes me because it amazes me how many young people study cinema and acting and drama in Palestine, while there is it's a limited, they know, and everybody knows that it is a limited situation. They cannot, it's not that there is a lot of to do. Most of my work, I do abroad. I don't do in Palestine. It's so obvious that we are limited regarding everything that is related to culture. We are limited because of the situation, because of the occupation, that people still go and learn and study acting. The amount of actors in Palestine, you don't believe it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of actors, and very talented actors and directors. So I think it's of course the media that is open, that people, it triggered the young people to say the word and to be part of this big world and to play a role in this world. It's triggered them, and I at the point forgot. Sorry.
Yeah. They haven't.
I would like
I'll
also
remember that.
I would like also to add that we are just, you know, another, you know, ring. Like there has been, like a lot of people has been paving the road.
Absolutely,
you know?
yes.
And now we started to drive, you know, on the road. So it's like, it's also a continuation, and the next generation, you know, we're not going to do this for, so the next generation is going to continue, you know. So I think it's important to recognize, you know, our film history and to predict the future, so we can learn from the past and keep going, you know.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's an interesting thing, and I know we have to go to the audience Q&A. I think they're gonna cut us off soon. Representation matters is such a cliche term at this point, but it really does matter. I mean, you know, we haven't seen nuanced stories about Palestinian men and women and the way they live their lives, whether it's inside Palestine and Palestine or outside in the rest of the world. Like, I haven't seen myself on screen, much less a Palestinian living in the West Bank, Gaza, or Haifa, or Nasr. So, you know, that's a very important thing. I hope I don't get in trouble, because I have one more question I feel like is necessary to ask. Do you think that streaming services have changed the game for Middle Eastern filmmakers? So why I say that is because whereas before they might do a festival circuit and eventually maybe get some limited distribution in some European countries, maybe in the Middle East, now with a film like this, The Present, you're all of a sudden in hundreds of millions of homes. I mean, you know, that is incredible. As a filmmaker, you guys must feel so proud and so happy that, you know, this would have had a legitimate festival run. It would have won awards. It would have been nominated for the Oscars and the BAFTA. But to open it up to an audience like this, where there was not much film distribution in actual theaters in these countries, now people can click their TV on and watch your movie. I mean, you know, how do you feel about that? How do you know, and you can keep your answers a little short so we can get to the Q&A, but I needed to talk about the streaming element that has entered the game here for the Middle East.
Well, I said to Saleh only about an hour ago, where I said we were, you know, saying like, this is wonderful, we're here, we're nominated, whatever happens, happens. And I said to him, but you know what I'm really happy about is that the film is on Netflix.
Yeah.
And distributed elsewhere as well. And I said, because to me, that was the most important thing, and the most self-gratifying thing is that it's in front of such a wide audience, and it's reached, you know, you could tell someone in the US, type in The Present, and you can watch this film about a Palestinian man and it's what it represents as well. You know, it's bold and it's unapologetic, and yet it's on the main, you know, streaming platform in the world. So I think it's a huge achievement, and I'm thrilled by that, absolutely. And I think the gatekeepers of these other kind of narratives are not as strong. I mean, before you sort of say Hollywood pretty much kind of ran the show of how Arabs and even just I say the Palestinian kafia was represented on the screen. And now it's a different landscape, and I think this is an exciting new landscape, to be honest. So, yeah.
Osama, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, we make films to share it with people, you know, to show it to audience. We like, you know, we don't make films for fun. We make films of our social need to share our thoughts and our, you know, what we want to express with people. And the more people we get to, of course, it's the more we are more excited and happy. And in the same time, you know, what's happening, it's all about technology. You know, this is how they discovered cinema. They discovered cinema through a chemical, you know, it was, you know, a chemistry. And then they discovered TV like waves. And then they discovered, and now because of the internet, because of this whole technology, we can reach so much people. You know, in the past, there was no electricity. They used to do theater plays for 100, 200 people. Now you can reach millions of people, and I don't know where it's gonna go, you know, in 10 or 20 years. And I'm excited, you know.
Holograms. You'll have Saleh performing in your living room.
Okay, so let's start the Q&A here before I get axed out of here. Okay, let me see here. Okay, so Tamara Selli, excuse me if I butcher that name. I can't believe I'm butchering an Arabic name. Asif, okay, for Farah. The ending of the film makes the whole film. How did you come up with this brilliant last moment?
So there were variations of the ending, and I'm not going to lie, at the beginning, you know, it was the more realistic outcome, which we know is more deathly force or physical violence or arrest, but the ending was just ongoing. We were already, even Saleh was already cast, and we still didn't have our final ending. And I was having a chat with the father of Mariam Kenj, Nail Kenj, in their home. He's the production designer on the film. And he said to me, well, okay, what if his daughter saves him?
And it's a spoiler, Farah. It's a spoiler.
Yeah, they've seen.
Everybody?
Yeah, that's why they're asking about it. Everyone's seen the film. We had this thing where we said anyone who's going to attend this has to have seen the film.
Okay.
Yeah. So I basically said, I love that. Okay, how? And he said, I don't know. I was like, okay, let me think about this. So I went away. I had 3 variations of how she could, you know, save him, if you like. And the one you saw is the one that, you know, resonated the most. And I kind of went with and said, right, this is the one I'm happy to go ahead with. And I'm so glad I did. So glad. Like, yeah.
Okay, so Ken Galal says, hello, wonderful film. I was wondering if there was any particular incident that Farah, her family, or her friends experienced that inspired the film, or is it based on the cumulative Palestinian experience of living under debilitating and degrading military occupation? So you kind of answered some of that. Maybe just if there's something a little.
It's both of what he said. So there's the bigger picture, the macro of what's happening, whether I've seen it with my own eyes or I've not. I get it, and there's that. But no, I've had a lot of personal experiences at the checkpoints. I've been with people who have been humiliated in front of me, friends, people I you know, have watched them repeatedly. Take off your thing, put that down, come back, put your shoe. Like I've witnessed old people being shouted at by 18-year-olds. And I have a friend who lives in Hebron, and he lives in an area where there is a checkpoint 100 meters from his home. And I've been through those checkpoints with him, and he literally has to go through a checkpoint 3, 4, 5 times a day, depending what he wants to do, where he wants to go. So it's a culmination, and it's of all those experiences, as well as very personal experiences and understandings. Yeah.
Okay, so Fatima Amar says, actually something simple to another question I was going to ask, but didn't have time to. Did you experience any physical issues in filming, e.g. filming at a checkpoint? seems so dangerous. So my other thing, and I want to kind of direct this a little bit towards Saleh as well as Osama for this one, and I'm sure you can jump in, Farah, is, you guys filmed at a real checkpoint for some of this, and some of those shots were actually Palestinian civilians walking through checkpoint, Saleh. So I'm curious, as an actor, for you, how did it inform you? I mean, I know you've been there before, but when you're shooting a film and you're capturing live footage of this happening, you're kind of in it, really in it, and you're kind of in it as the character as well. So did it feel different? Did it feel the same? Is that how you approached it? I'm just curious for you.
I was embarrassed because I knew that I'm doing that only for the film. I will not never go back to this checkpoint again at that hour early in the morning, 3 in the morning, to that checkpoint. I have no reason to go to that checkpoint again in my life. So I was embarrassed that I'm going to go through this checkpoint only for the camera and only for the film. So I felt Saleh embarrassed to be there. Adding to that the frustration that I felt, adding to that all the things that any sensitive human being could just perceive there. So it was embarrassing for me, but it was very, very difficult to acknowledge this. I've been to many times to checkpoints, and my life were threatened on few of them, but never been to this checkpoint or to any checkpoint at 3 o'clock in the morning, and to see this great amount of people, hundreds of people standing there, like the first image you get is that these people are going to slaughter. They're going to slaughter them.
That's exactly
the first image you get when you see these people. This is the first image you get, and it tears you from the inside. Even if you know and you've been, and even if, like, I don't know, I just cannot get used to that. I just cannot see it as a normal thing. The moment I see it as a normal thing, I lost my conscience, I lost my humanity, I lost me.
Absolutely. And it is outrageous, and it should never be something that's normalized, and it should never be something that should happen to any human being. We shouldn't treat other human beings, regardless of their race, color, ethnicity, whatever, in that capacity. Osama, do you want to brush up just a little briefly on, producing a film in a situation like this, where it's not necessarily in the 48 area or somewhere international, but it is in like the absolute hot zone, so to speak, of the situation?
I mean, the most difficult place to shoot in Palestine is on a checkpoint, because it's very rare that you get a permission for it, and it's very rare that the director will give it up. So you have to do it one way or another. We did it with the Salt of the Sea, we did it with other films, and we did it with the Present. And of course, Farah insisted. And I like it when directors insist, to be honest with you. At the same time, you have the worry that, you might get your director and actor arrested and confiscate the camera, But they did it well. Farah, Saleh, and the cameraman that was with them. We had some assistance, from the Palestinian worker. We had some kind of assistance, and it worked out. But usually this kind of scenes that are in the actual checkpoint, of course I'm talking about the opening of the film, it's usually guerrilla style,
Right.
And we're used to do such things in Palestine.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to emphasize that a major part of why I wanted to make this film was that checkpoint, which is why I insisted. I mean, I'd been through that checkpoint myself before, And I was like, this has to be in the film. And it's who Yusuf is ultimately. If you're going to understand Yusuf for the rest of the film, you need to see what it is Yusuf goes through every day. That's his backstory. That's who this man is, you know?
Absolutely. Okay, let me look at some other questions here we can brush off. Can you say a bit about the daughter actress? Is she Saleh's daughter in real life? We know that's not your daughter in real life, but you wanted her to look like him, right, Farah?
Yeah. So Maryam Khan, she's not an actress. I mean, she is. She's fantastic, but she's not a trained actress at all. And she's the daughter of Nail Khan, who's the production designer. But I basically cast her by visiting her aunt, and she said to me, you know, I said to her, I'd cast Saleh Bakri. I'd like a girl who's young, speaks Arabic, you know, all of this, and ideally looks like the father in the film, then the mother. And she brought up her niece, and when I saw the picture of her, I went, oh my God, like literally even the jawline, let alone the eyes, like it was like shocking. Anyway, I visit her. She's phenomenal. Fell in love with her. She's extremely talented, emotionally intelligent, and very confident. And of course, because her father has been a production designer, she's been on the sets of films. So she's got that confidence amongst sort of, you know, adults and strangers and all of that. And of course, Saleh knows Nail and Layla, the parents of Maryam, over the years. So we had no idea about the connection. I'm somewhere else and I discovered, but then I said, I think I found our Yasmin, and brought them together. And it was a family affair, literally. It was like, wow, this is, you know, and yeah, that was it.
Perfect. Okay, next question. Okay, just look here, guys. Sorry, one second. Let's look here. Janine Ibrahim would like to know, what permissions did Farah get to shoot the film? How much did she have to film or do without the Israelis knowing? And does she have any concerns of not being allowed to travel back to Palestine after the film's wide success, meaning punishment by Israelis for the film?
So just to be clear, you know, most people, I don't know if they know, but the West Bank is divided into areas A, B, and C by the Israeli military. And so we were quite smart. Other than that particular checkpoint 300, the real one, you know, we were just smart about where we chose to shoot. And so anywhere that required municipality approvals, like from the, you know, the Palestinian municipalities, those were obtained. And we just avoided areas where they would be more trouble, if you like, or where it would be a gray zone of where we would need permits and things like that. So we were just smart about those choices. I don't think about it, is my answer. And I don't particularly want to think about it. And you just forge forward. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to stop making films. So if that ever came to it, we'll make it wherever the hell we have to make it. I'll do it via the internet.
Right?
I will do it through the internet. I'll literally be like, right, place the camera here. This is what I want. Like, it can be done. And so we're just going to keep doing it. We need to do it in Jordan. We'll do it in Jordan. But, you know, so I'm not going to think about it, to be honest. Just going to keep doing it.
Yeah, good. Please do. Okay, let me keep looking here.
Do it.
Please win an Oscar, guys. Inshallah.
I
had to say that. This comes from Rasha Kamhaya. Sorry. Congratulations on the BAFTA award. We are in awe of your win for the first film you directed, knowing that not long ago you were leading a corporate career in the financial industry. When was the point in time when you realized that you can change the world through storytelling, and what in your finance background and previous corporate life facilitated you plowing through the challenges and hurdles of writing and producing your film?
Wow, it's a lot there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go backwards. I'll work backwards. I think the things that I brought to sort of the film world and directing world and, you know, producing and raising capital and co-writing and all of that are extreme organization. Like I'm a very organized person. And I've got a very thick skin as well, because when you work in business and finance, especially I was in investment banking, a very male-dominated industry and all of that, I developed a very thick skin and sort of the mathematical side of my brain and organizational skills. I mean, I remember Saleh looking at the script, and he needed a copy. He needed my script for a second. His script is in the car, and he looked at it and had all my shots with a ruler and my, what I wanted. And it doesn't mean there's no room for spontaneity. But it just, I much prefer to be very organized. And from there, things can flow. And he looked at me, he was like, you're extremely organized. And I was like, listen, that's my mind. That's how I work. So those are the kind of things I bought from that world. But ultimately, the big change, came, the short version is I went home. I had been to Palestine as a child many times, and then nothing since the first Intifada for 25 years. And then I go back only a number of years ago, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, the colossal injustice. I mean, how systematic, how institutionalized, how insane it is. I mean, even though I knew, I'd read, I'd understood, but you go and you see there's no comparison in that sense. And I've always believed stories can change the world. I remember watching Jim Sheridan's In the Name of the Father when I was a teenager, and it impacted me. It impacted me. And from there, I wanted to learn all about the Irish Revolution and all about so I've always believed that. I just wasn't necessarily believing that I'm the one who could tell those stories necessarily, initially. But again, I'm one of those people who just throw caution to the wind. Let's just do it. Let's try it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, I fall on my face. I don't care, is the answer. So if I don't care, then I can forge forward and do these things. And here we are. So
Part of being an artist.
I think, yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's go to another question here. So I'm going to direct this question to Osama and to Saleh. It's not necessarily directly pointed at you, but I'd appreciate your answers on this. I feel like it'd be interesting to hear your perspectives. What can we do to help support this film and other Palestinian films and push them into the mainstream? So let's start with Osama, and then we can go to Saleh with this one.
To watch our films and, tell everyone to watch our films. This is, I think, Hollywood and TV and, TV stuff in the Arab world has ruined the audience taste. Unfortunately, audience taste used to be, in my opinion, used to be better back in, when people were really thirsty to go to the theater to watch a film, like to Nazareth, where I come from, there used to be one film every 6 months, and people used to go see this one film for 10, 12, 15 times, the same film. And today there is so much, and I think, you can help these films by really bringing them to the mainstream, watching them and trying to promote them and telling, family and friends to watch them. This is, on the individual level. So, yeah.
You can finance these films as well. Whoever can should.
Whoever can,
frankly,
yeah.
I mean,
it's a matter of the film business in the Arab world outside of Egypt. It's a matter of people believing that it's a viable industry on its own. And that's why I mentioned before the whole streaming issue, because it's never been an economy. It's never been something that Middle Easterners or Arab particular will be like, I'm going to invest in that because that's a money-making proposition. They always
changing, Tariq. It's changing.
It's changing. That's what I'm curious about. I want that to change. But in the industry, but nah, yeah, I didn't know. Sorry, I'm speaking Arabic. Yeah, it's important. I think it's very, very important that people understand that now. That's why the streaming thing is this is like Netflix is buying and making local content for specific countries. And that's one streaming service. That's not the other 20 versions of that and the inevitable versions of that will exist exclusively in the Middle East, towards the Middle East. So, Saleh, I don't want to cut you off. Maybe you want to respond a little bit to that question.
Yeah, share it, share about it, talk about it, write about it, share as much as you can. Of course, if you can finance, that's no question. We Palestinians, especially because our narrative is being, or they try to erase it, they try to shut it down, to shut up the narrative, not to, or to disturb its way to the people. So because of that, we have a reason to fight, to say our narrative, to talk about it, to tell stories as much as we can, because we are not allowed to tell our story.
That's it.
We are not allowed to tell our story since 1948. And this is an exception. There are few exceptions, we know about them, but these are still exceptions until now, till this moment. We have to keep telling our stories until the situation would be different, and the Palestinians would come back to their homeland, and we could live normally with each other. And I can do theater in Haifa, and people from Gaza come to see my theater.
Exactly.
And I can go to Gaza to perform in Gaza. So please share, talk about it as much as you can, whenever you can, to all your friends, to all the people you know, and that's it. Thank you.
I think there's also an educational process in this, in the sense of, like, if anything, this experience has taught me that there is audiences out there who do want to engage, who are intrigued, who would welcome more and more. And so it's the industry gatekeepers again, whether it's producers, executive producers, distributors, salespeople, are starting to wake up a bit to this idea that, okay, there are stories coming out of this region and obviously Palestine, and they're great stories, they're interesting stories, there's a market for them, there is an audience for them. So therefore, there might be that commercial viability for them as well. So it's really important that the audience, if you want to know what to do as well, is to let those streamers and let those people know that there's demand for this. Do you see what I mean? That there's an interest for this kind of content.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's do one more question. I think we're almost out of time, but I want to do one or two more little questions, and then I'll do some closing remarks. Elizabeth Vasquez, greetings from Miami. I've had the opportunity to travel to Palestine and experience the checkpoints, and this film captured everything so beautifully. For those who are completely unfamiliar with the occupation and have this film as their first introduction to it, what feeling, action do you hope to leave them with? What message would you give them? And this is open to the three of you, whoever wants to go for it.
I think we leave them with a question, not with a message. Maybe Farah would like to.
Yeah, no, I've always said the question is, would I accept this for myself? I mean, really, that this is, you watch this, you're emotionally impacted by it. And I know this is the case because I've received that kind of feedback. Yeah. And then of course, there's the questions of why, if you're not familiar with what's going on in the West Bank and in Palestine, and you're not sure on what military occupation is about and involved, you still ask yourself, what the hell is happening here? This is wrong. Yeah. And then really, I want audiences to ask themselves, would they accept this for themselves? I mean, ultimately, that's what I hope. I want people to contemplate the film. I want them to research, to somehow be that much more enlightened about the situation, circumstance. Yeah. Anything you?
So maybe also to adding to what you said, just to encourage the people to say it. Fuck your system.
Yeah.
My favorite line in the whole film. And that's why when we edited, we had it repeated 3 times. Because it is a system. Yeah, that's exactly it. There are some key lines in this film. I just want to go home. That for me is, it's not just this guy wants to go home. There are refugees in their millions who just want to go home. I mean, you know, for me, this was a much bigger statement. And can we just this one time use the road?
Yeah, it's outrageous. It really is.
Really? We're asking to use the road? Like, all right. And then F your system. The system cannot stand.
Okay, so Laura Albast asks, congratulations on the BAFTA win and the Oscar nomination. What's the significance of the watch, if any? We see Yusuf looking at it at the beginning of the film, then again with his daughter, asks him about it before Israeli soldiers make him take it off.
So it's very symbolic for me. Time. What is the most precious thing to every human being is their time, right? We're only here for a finite number of years. And there's nothing more annoying than having your time wasted and stolen and taken. And what do these checkpoints do ultimately? Yes, they humiliate and they frustrate and they separate Palestinians from Palestinians and all of that. But really, it is the ultimate theft of one of the most precious things to every human being, which is their time. And there's also the element of inheritance as well. You know, he mentions that his father gave it to him, that it's precious to him. Of course, as we inherit from our fathers and our mothers and our land and our, and yet they take the watch from him. They are taking his time, they're taking his wealth in that sense, and they are taking his inheritance. So for me, a very, very symbolic element to the film.
I can add to that from my own personal point of view. And this, every time I see the film and during the shooting, I always remember my father. And the story of my father is his story, his personal story, but it is also our story and my story, my personal story. And I believe that my story, my personal story, is a continuation of his story. I didn't start from, as an actor, I didn't start from zero. I start from 90. I was born to an actor. And the essence I got as an actor is from him. I learned it from him. He didn't teach me directly, but because I followed him since I remember myself until this day, I followed his movement inside this great river of art. And I always remember, I had to talk every time about Jeanine because this film is a narrative or a piece of the narrative of the Palestinian people, especially talking about the refugees in Jenin camp that was destroyed in 2002. And since the film got to air, streamed, it was persecuted, and it's about 19 years of persecution in Israel. And just because they don't want this story out. So every time I do this scene, every time I see the scene, and the moment I remember this story, and it's in my heart, it's in my, because I followed him. I followed his story with the Israeli censorship since 19 years. And I know how much they just limited his work. They didn't let him speak. They just systematically ruined his life since 19 as an actor. Of course, he never gave up, and he kept fighting, and he kept doing, even if they tried not to limit him, but he never gave up, and we will never give up, and we will continue. And this watch is just a symbol that our time will never end. Our time will continue as human beings, first of all, and then as a Palestinians, of course.
Thank you for such a beautiful answer. Well said. So we have about a minute to wrap up. Instead of going to more questions, I just wanted to, reflect with you guys just for a moment, just some thoughts that you guys might have on this experience and what it's been like for each of you. We are all so proud at any time a Palestinian artist makes it to a place where, to me, it's not about the awards. It's not about winning things. It's about people seeing the stories. It's about people understanding what's really happening on the ground there. If that's in a documentary, if that's in a painting, if that's in a TV show or a movie, a short or a feature, it does not matter. All it matters is that film and art is a vehicle in which we communicate to the outside world. And so, if the three of you want to just give a couple of thoughts about how you feel about this film, your experience making this film in general, being a Palestinian in movies, go for it. And then I'm going to ask Margaret to come back on in about 30 seconds to a minute.
I'm just grateful to have been able to make this film. And I'm so grateful about the reactions it's having. And it's wild and wonderful, to be honest, what is happening right now. And it just confirms to me, and I hope it confirms to every other creative, whether it's in Palestine or in the Arab world, we have stories to tell, and we can tell them boldly, and we can tell them unapologetically. And, we should and we must keep doing that.
Absolutely. Osama or Saleh?
Well, for me, it was, when you get to know a director, you must get engaged, otherwise you cannot make a film together. You must, you must love the film, you must get engaged with the director. It has to be interesting because it's going to be years from beginning to end. So, I think me and Farah, it was a great collaboration. And me and Saleh, my dear friend, it's been, I don't count films anymore. Him,
I wish I had that privilege.
and Anne-Marie, of course, my partner, my, the company founder with Saleh. It's been a long history. And, it was such a rewarding experience. You get into something you don't know, but your heart tells you to go for it because, you feel something. And here we are,
Anne-Marie, by the way, miss you. Saleh.
Another dose of strength to my optimist. There is two inside me, optimist and pessimist, and they are fighting all the time. I'm not pessimist because my optimist is still fighting and will never give up the fight. And this is another dose of strength to my optimist, and I'm very, very happy we arrived to here, to LA today, and my happiness is great because it's not personal, because it's the happiness of Osama, it's the happiness of Farah, it's the happiness of everybody who worked hard.
That's right.
On this film, and the happiness of a lot of people who believe in justice and who want a change in this world, and who eager to change in this world.
Tariq, one last thing. I also want to mention the great team and crew that, was with us in Palestine, that were mostly Palestinian, and, they were there for us, for Farah, for myself, for Saleh, and I want to thank them.
Especially Raja Dabbiya, Allah yarhamu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank him.
Well, what a absolutely inspiring, and I want to go make a movie tonight. Like this has been a fantastic conversation with the three of you. Yani Farah and Saleh, I can't believe I'm not in LA. If it wasn't COVID, I'd fly back for the weekend to have dinner and then I'd come back to New York. And Amjad.
Like I said, we'll just have to do it all again.
Or you guys have to stop by New York on your way back to wherever you're going.
No, we're just going to make another Oscar-winning, Oscar-nominated film. That's all. Easy. Don't worry. We'll get it done.
I'm so pleased to see you again in a few years. I'm so happy for your success, and for all of you, this film. Please go win an Oscar, and even if you don't, please go win it. But even if you don't, we're still as proud of you.
We've already won, Tariq. Khalas, we've already won. Where we are with this film, we've already won. It is what it is.
Yes, it's a great attitude. Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys. I respect you guys. And I wish you the best in the next couple of weeks, years, and wherever your paths take you to. So I'd like Margaret to come back on and give some closing remarks if possible.
Thank you, Tariq.
Thanks, Tariq. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tariq, for treating us to such a rich discussion. And thank you, Farah, Saleh, and Osama for spending some time with us tonight. I want to second Tariq's thoughts as a Palestinian American. You make us all proud. So thank you for your work, for your vision, for your creation, and for the message of this film. Saleh, hearing you speak about your refusal to see the checkpoints as normal, I hope that it's gratifying to all of you that you've been able to expose the abnormal and the absurd that Palestinians are forced to endure in a way that audiences have connected with so emotionally. And Farah, we believe that stories can change the world too, and we know that this film is one powerful step toward dismantling that unjust system and that abnormal reality that you brought to light. Everyone who joined today, we're so grateful that you could be with us. Please continue to show your support for this incredible film online and ask everyone you know to watch it and support it in the lead up to the Oscars on April 25th. If you don't already, go follow our panel of guests online. We'll share their handles in a follow-up email to stay on top, again, of all things Palestine. Follow the IMEU. Guys, you absolutely have won already, but we'll still be rooting for you on Oscar night, and we hope you bring it home. Good evening to everyone, and thanks again.
Thank you, Margaret.